Before we begin, if this resonates, please like, subscribe, and share. Portals is devoted to exploring where the future is emerging and how we can consciously co-create the evolution now arising in humanity. Join our gatherings and add your voice to this shared inquiry. Together, we can explore the big questions of our time. Welcome to Portals of Perception and to Current Openings number 31. What the world doesn't quite get yet, and what David and Aviv are about to try to attempt to get into as we dive in the current of this search with creational logic. And David, the title we have for this one, working title, is Sacred Polarity, Listening for the Masculine and Feminine in Creation. I'm looking at the slide and I'll bring it up in a minute. Good to have you back on this exploration here today.
And to see you, Aviv.
Well, let me do this. Let me bring the slide and invite that we make a few bridging comments from the previous exploration and lead us into today. So into this exploration into the masculine and the feminine in creation. In the previous episode, we looked at giving and receiving and reflected on these three dynamics, sun and planet Earth, and how they make love through trees, these two celestial bodies, the parent and the child, and the giving of life both ways, the teacher and the student, and how both sides need to practice listening to facilitate that third process. And anything you'd offer here is a bridging from episode 30 into what we are embarking on here.
I would offer a recommendation to listen to episode 30. I've not said that about any previous current openings, but in relation to the relationship between 30 and 31, I think it's going to be very valuable to listen to episode 30 as an entry point into episode 31. I think it gets us into this territory of the sacred polarity powerfully, and I would make that recommendation.
Yeah, great. And we also covered in episode 30 the expression of giving and receiving and positive and negative through the intermergence of the sperm and the egg. There is a positive charge rushing to meet its negative charge to create something else, and the day and the night, the day being the outgoing positive, the night being the negative receptive. And the, as you said on that episode, you'd never find a current without a magnetic field around it. So all these I'm bringing as a bridging before we take this earlier exploration into positive and negative and build it into masculine and feminine. Anything else you'd offer here as a bridging?
That the language that we're using is to express what the case actually is. Like the example there of sperm and egg, it takes an actual sperm and an actual egg for new life to be procreated. And we can put with that whatever language we want, but that is the fundamental creation logic reality of what it takes for new life to form. There has to be a junction of two powers. And in that example, although it shows the sperm and the egg as almost equal in size, I think the egg is about 80,000 times the size of the sperm. So the power is in there's a lot of power in the small, And again, the reality of two things actually coming together and then a third thing being caused is the reality of how creation actually works here on this planet. And so part of creation logic is to endeavor to get closer to reality, to get closer to the house rules of planet Earth, um, and not to go after the sophistication or sophistry of things that we can invent. Because, it's like, to take an example, although one might go to a place where there's humans dressed as ducks, and so it looks like there's talking ducks, we know they don't actually, in the reality of creation logic, that's a human invention. It doesn't actually, it's not a direct connection into creation and its workings. And the power comes from the direct connection. So being original means going to the origin. Invention tends to mean moving further away from the origin. It depends on the invention, but the closer it can be to an original power and signal, the greater the potency. Because think of the potency that's present within that nuclear meeting between the sperm and the egg to actually cause that zygote. That is the beginning of new life. That is a creation process and creation logic at work.
And if you just stumbled on this conversation, you may wonder, why does it look like or sound like we've taken the current openings into a kindergarten level of looking at very basic things. And we took the whole half of episode 30 to address the question of what's the logic of studying and attuning to creational logic, and those very ideas you just framed, David, in terms of becoming attuned and conscious, bringing conscious awareness to how we are actually designed, to how the human system is actually designed, and to practically how each and every domain, core domain of life, any core domain of knowledge is governed. And we gave some concrete examples of how, by developing mastery and attuning and making yourself, you could say one, but I would say many, with the creational logic, you become a whole orchestra for the creational music to play through you. And there was a specific practice that we offered in episode 30, current openings 30, whereby you take every day, at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, sometime in the evening or night, a few minutes to reflect on the day, on everything you've experienced. Your work time, your time at home with your family, whatever it is you're doing, and you'd note some of the polarities that were activated. Where did you experience giving and receiving? Where did you experience the grow and wither? Where did you experience the expand or contract? Where did you experience the sense of opening to possibilities or shutting out possibilities? Where did you experience all those different natures of running fast or slowing down, of becoming heated or cooling down? Where and how did you manage these? And what is the take-home value in terms of the downside risks of the two sides of the polarity and the upside opportunity, such that you become a master of your own world, a master of your own polarities. And when you do so, you become a better tool for whatever it is that you may choose to serve, you may choose to facilitate, you may choose to lead. And it is that now brings me to this deeper exploration into masculine and feminine. And even before bringing the image that will accompany this, settling just with the realization that we are speaking here about an archetypal pattern, an archetypal character, the masculine, not in the way we just reduce it or see men and women every day, but describing the masculine positive giving principle in creation, and the feminine, negative, receptive, upholding, containing principle in creation. Anything you'd say to this, David, before I
Yeah.
bring? Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I would highlight the fact we're talking about two natures of energy. So we're talking about two powers, and then how they manifest in organic life on the planet. So, and even before we get to the human, how we see that there's masculine and feminine inclinations in the rest of organic life, except in very unusual circumstance. But we don't talk so much about rocks or minerals having masculine and feminine. But once we get into the organic life of the planet, we're looking at these two great powers and their workings. Whether it's in the form of how it appears in plant life, or in flora life, in fauna life, and then in human life. So one can approach it physical first and stay within the human domain. And so we're looking at physical first. But if one comes the other way and says, well, according to creation logic and the house rules of the planet, obviously there's these two great principles through which a third power is able to work. And these two principles turn up with what we call in our language a masculine inclination and a feminine inclination. And when we start digging into what these actually are, and not just staying with the surface words, we start to discover those energies and how they manifest. So I'd highlight that feature of these are energetic properties that then turn up in different forms. But
Yeah,
fundamentally, we're looking at two energetic powers coming
yeah,
through and into the organic life of the planet.
that's great. Indeed. This morning, as I was doing my morning jog in the little forest here, and I was thinking about what we were going to record, I said, well, look, it's all around you. Look at all the trunks of the trees. They represent the masculine, positive, uplifting vector expressing itself from and through that growth. So the planet itself, right, is the negative, feminine, and she gives rise to that positive masculine trunks that give rise to the canopy of the forest, which is feminine again. So there is an interplay of feminine, masculine, feminine, masculine. And if you look inside the trunk and the fluids that it delivers up and down the trunk, well, we see the masculine within the feminine and the feminine within the masculine, which is why we are bringing this into focus. And the more we dwell, David, with what you just offered, that first of all, these are energetic properties, the more we realize that the whole postmodern preoccupation with masculine and feminine is removed from the simple core creational logic and often gets distorted and very confused. So I think we don't necessarily want to cover that part now, but it is something we will come back to at some point to, well, what is it? What is it? And why is it that there is such a great confusion in the world now about the feminine and the masculine properties? Why is it that we do not realize that these are, as you said, archetypal natures, archetypal properties, and that they are, first of all, energetic properties, and that they're complementing each other, they're supporting each other, as we've seen in the previous episode. They are the two ends of one larger process. Let me pause here and invite your comments and reflections, and then I want to go deeper into mystery of these properties and describe a little bit about how they are natured in the case of the masculine structure and the feminine structure?
Well, the further we move as a human race or as an individual, the further we move from creation logic, the more confusing and hard to understand life becomes. Because creation logic contains the logic by which our human design works, the planet works, the solar system works. It's a system going somewhere, which has within it the signature of both the creative principle and also what it takes for it to be maintained and continue. So as I said a little previously, it is possible for a human to dress up in a duck costume and pretend like they're a talking ducks. And people will pay money to go to a world in which these pretend animals will talk to them. Uh, that does not mean that it's getting the human closer to creation logic. It's possible to work in what I call extensionalism, away from creation logic, which is sophistry, sophistication. The more we move in that direction, the weaker the power connection becomes, because the power for human life comes from the logos. We don't keep our own heart beating. We don't keep our own lungs functioning. We actually can't make one of these. We don't know how, we would not have a beginning of how to form it up. So the logos gives us the gift of life, and we can then work to better understand that gift and the logic of how it works and seek to connect to those core powers. We can also, we have permission, unlike the rest of organic life, which stays with creation logic by enforcement, because it's not got the ability to use its brain to go outside of the permission. We can also move away into weakening power by going into a more and more fictitious, sophisticated world. Um,
Yes.
is that to our best benefit? I would put a question mark on that. We can do it, but is it really to our best benefit? What brings greater potency to a human life? I think is a very, very valid question to ask.
And one aspect, one feature, central feature of the creational logic is how negative and positive are made to be attracted to each other. If positive and negative were not made to be attracted to each other, if the masculine and the feminine properties and patterns were not made to be attracted to each other, the universe will fall apart because the difference of their nature will make them fly in opposite direction. We do know that if you bring positive and positive, they repel. You bring negative and negative, they repel. But positive and negative, the two ends of the magnet, they are attracted to each other. And because they are attracted to each other, everything that we see around us, from the smallest particles to all the more complex structures that we can observe anywhere around us, biophysical structures and all organic living structures, they are all made possible because the positive and the negative are attracted to each other. So the mystery is, how are they made to be attracted to each other? And before we begin to offer clues into that, let us truly dwell with the realization that yes, the, the masculine structure, the masculine body, the masculine system is positively charged by nature. And the feminine body, the feminine system is negatively charged. The masculine is designed with preponderance to be outgoing, to be the expression of the thrusting power, the initiating power. The feminine is designed to exhibit and express the caring, the upholding, the unifying, the uniting properties. But how are they made to be attracted to each other? How is it that the whole of the universe is actually holding and staying together through this? Well, this is where we need to bring this other dimension and realize that actually they are each a bit of both. And that what that means is that the physical body of a man is positively charged and oriented, but it is therefore understood that the subtle energetic body of a man is negatively charged. Again, if it wasn't like that, they wouldn't hold together. The feminine body is negatively charged, physical body, but her subtle energetic body is positively charged. And it is this which is giving rise to the esoteric appreciation that the higher aspect of the man is feminine in nature, and the higher aspect of the woman is masculine in nature. That intuition, that insight, is based in the realization that the subtle energetic natures of those polarities, they switch over. The negative shows up with the positive shows up with the negative. But we are beginning to describe here what we touched on in various explorations before about the mystery, the reversal mystery of how it is that there is a reversal of polarities through octave shift. What would you offer to this, David?
All right. I go with two separate parts. The first was to do with the aspect of how is creation logic by which the human continues. Just a simple example: if all the men of the planet went to one pole and all the women of the planet went to the other pole, then after about 100 years there would be no more human race. So it's that powerful a law. It's that essential to human continuance and procreation, which is on behalf of creation in many ways. But that was to do with that. With regard to the positive, negative coming together, then to give an understanding from esoteric history, which is a very popular symbol that is worn, which comes from a time of the Yellow Emperor of China about 3,000 years ago, where most of the work on things like Tai Chi, Qigong, acupuncture, it all comes from about a 30-year period of the Yellow Emperor of China. There was a very interesting person there called Qi who worked in association with that Yellow Emperor. And part of what we get is the name of Qi and Qi, the energy studies, which China, even the country, is named after. It's China. From those energy studies, what we find is a symbol. We see people in the West wearing it on T-shirts. The symbol of the balance between the so-called yin and the yang, the rooster and they have often the two different birds representing the two different energies. And what that's showing is that in that symbol, you get 2/3 feminine, but in the middle of that feminine, or the middle of the 2/3 masculine, let's say, there's a 1/3 feminine. And the middle of the 2/3 feminine, there's a 1/3 masculine. And the amazing thing is, if we could see that symbol in operation, we'd see it spinning. it's spinning because one part is the two-thirds masculine is chasing the one-third masculine inside the feminine and vice versa. And we'd actually see it spinning. And spinning things draw in power. So that yin yang principle, they then drew a symbol to represent the creation logic of the very thing we're talking about. The reason I mention it is to root it in that ancient study, and that people may wear the symbol of it and with a kind of an understanding that it's something important. They'll talk about yin and yang, but what it is, it's a demonstration of an early understanding of creation logic. And it's integral to what it is we're speaking about. And it shows that there's substantia. It's not like we're making this stuff up. It has a long history of understanding and of putting it both into language and even closer to creation, actual working symbology, which that symbol, that yin yang symbol, is very much a powerful representation of what you have on the screen there.
Well, as always, almost always, you're just 2 or 3 steps ahead of me and ahead of the slides, which is great. And what I do want is to just even anchor it in even more so in the day-to-day reality, because for some people they may wonder, well, what do you mean when you say that the body of a woman is negatively charged? And we would add to this that this is in the reproductive premenopausal years, especially. It is the case that she is negative by nature. She is in the receptive, cyclical, upholding, uplifting mode of her life that enables her to carry and give birth to life, that she is in this polarity for about 3 weeks each month. But the body of a woman maintains this receptive polarity by allowing itself in the 4th week of the month to shift to be in the positive polarity, which is when she is cleansing her blood. And when she is cleansing her blood, she's not just cleansing herself, she is performing a planetary service to herself and to humanity at large. All women, as they process the energetic of humanity, because this planet is feminine by nature. We men, we do not have the same access because we're not living in a feminine body, so we don't have the energetic arcing in the same way as the feminine body does. And so what the female body does is it cleanses, and in the 1 week a month when she is purifying and cleansing her blood, she's actually performing a very special biological automatic service to herself and to humanity at large. And this is made possible by the switching of polarities from being in the negative receptive to being in the positive. And so the awareness is that if more women understood this, they might feel less cursed about this and more reverent, I would say, of the profound service that they offer both themselves and humanity. And if more men understood the energetic function of this monthly cleansing, they would hold deeper respect, they would hold deeper value, they would hold the function, the energetic metabolic function of the feminine gender with the highest respect, because it is through this biological cleansing process that humanity, the human function, the human process, can continue to update and evolve and procreate itself into its continuance. So we men, we in a way are very fortunate. We're very fortunate because we have a media into this feminine planet. As we said, in the subtle energetic body, we are negatively charged. So we are able to receive, and in the physical body that we live in, we need actually the feminine capacity, the feminine process to evolve. Now, of course, there is the invitation that a man can develop profoundly its feminine nature, and a woman can profoundly develop her masculine capacity, which doesn't mean behaving like men, but means a woman can be embracing the masculine principle, the initiating principle, the leading principle, the constructing and establishing principle. All these are different expressions of the masculine principle. A woman can do that. What we're saying is that at an automatic level, there is a regulating, cleansing process that occurs between all men and all women. And we do not, when I say that, we do not necessarily speak of sexual union. We describe the automatic energetic process that occurs. And the invitation in describing that is that both men and women can become more appreciative of that dynamic, of that process. And anything you'd say to that?
But in relation to the big picture of creation logic, that currently there's, you could say, 4 billion, it's happening with 8 billion people, 4 billion men, 4 billion women. So we need to look at our personal experience as a secondary principle for a while. And what you're explaining here is how it works in the big picture. And then we come to the individual experience, which is more personalized. And so I would not want the audience to get confused between the two and be saying, well, that's not my personal experience, my feeling. That comes later. There's bigger, the universe is bigger than we are. The planet and her laws are bigger than we are. And there is actually a creation logic, and there are house rules, there are laws within which this planet works, and within which all of organic life operates, including the example you've given many times. If you can flap your arms as many times as you want, but you're not going to be able to fly. So this is looking at the big picture distribution of the masculine power, the positive power, the feminine power, and how creation needs and works with both. And that's the evidence of creation. That's the creation logic. Then there's our personalized experience, which may be, well, I tried to go out with so and that didn't quite work, and I'm more attracted to this kind of person than that kind of person. That's when we get down to our personalized relationships. This is coming out from a higher place than that, the bigger picture of the creation logic of masculine and feminine energy, and how both do contain both, but the predominance is different. So the feminine is at least 2/3 feminine. We can say 1/3 masculine. The masculine is 2/3 masculine, 1/3 feminine. And then that turns up inside not only the rest of organic life, but in the human race. And then we start to talk about male and female at one level, and then we start to talk about being a man or being a woman, and we get into our personal experience. So much in this modern time, people try and interpret the creation logic through what my personal experience of a relationship with another person is. But that's not the place to start. That's a declension. The place to start is creation works with these two great powers, and these two great powers work on behalf of creation, literally pro-creation. And it's by that fact that the human race, I mean, I looked at this the other day, from 1974 to 2002, just that little span of 48 years, 2022, sorry, that little span of 48 years, the human population doubled from 4 billion to 8 billion. How is that possible? because of the diagram that you've got on the screen there. Procreation. That's why that was possible. The positive and the negative attracted to each other, creating the possibility of new life.
So you're continually reminding us that the reason we are exploring this is an invitation to initially separate, I would say, and transcend the personalized experience, and then be able to integrate it in a whole new context.
Yes.
But in the first place, which is so counter to the culture of the moment, because the culture of the moment is how I experience and what I feel is the criteria for truth. And part of the whole journey we embarked on in creational logic was, can we find something that will guide us to truth and permanent line values in creation and the universe in such a way that we know for sure that we are standing on firm ground.
Yes.
And then as we do this process, there are those intuitions, and there are those sentiments, and there are those feelings that begin to arise. But then they arise from a different source. Just to give one example, because we started this by saying there is so much distorted and confused about feminine and masculine. What I will say now is that once we come more and closer to the way of the masculine and the feminine, it becomes natural for a man to seek to attune to the higher aspects of the masculine nature, inside of which there is an embrace, as you said, embrace the polarity, there is an embrace of the tremendous significance of the feminine function. And one way that gets expressed is by attending to the higher natures of the masculine energy. And some of the higher natures of the masculine energy are, for example, self-restraint. For example, resolve, determination. For example, discipline. That sense of purposeful care. Purposeful care is a very masculine property in the refined end of the bar of the masculine polarity. Because without those properties, the thrusting, initiating force can be reckless, can be destructive, can be dangerous. So this sense of chivalrous and valiant care, it's out of fashion today. This is completely associated with far back in history. But there is a reason why there was a code of conduct that emerged with the Knights of the Round Table. They recognized that if you have the power to kill, you must hold that power very close and govern it, because the power to kill and the power to heal came together. And if you were to unlock your power to heal, it meant you needed to be restrainful and disciplined with how you exercised the masculine power. So I'm just integrating those dimensions. Anything that feels right to bring to this, David?
To touch on the higher power in the feminine, that there's a feature of what could be called feminine command, which is very powerful, very potent. And when we get into the higher part, it's like we spoke of male becoming man. When you mention knights, then that's an elevation, a refinement of working with the energy. It's like saying we're connected, or when we go to the woman, there's the female and the woman, and then the knights would be with ladies. You get this curious change of terminology, which to me is taking the original grant of the energy, which makes us male or female, spinning in a way clockwise or counterclockwise. And then with refinement, we can lift up, we can work with that energy in the realms of human development to move from being a male towards being a man, or better yet, a gentle man, or a man gentle, as it used to be called, or going from a female into becoming much more conscious as a woman, moving toward the idea of a lady. And even in the terms knight and lady, you get the idea of the knight being the K night, which is literally the darkness of the night, and the lady being Lady Day. And you've got day and night right there, lady and night. You've got again this pointing to the bigger picture of the cosmos and how it's working through the individual. And it's whether or not, as individuals, we then embrace that and seek to work with and refine those energies, or whether we kind of take it for granted and then go off and do our own identity thing with it because we see ourselves to be the criteria rather than, oh, we've actually been given a higher possibility than the rest of organic life. That means we can tune in consciously rather than deciding, oh, that means I can walk away and do something completely different. It depends on how we align ourselves. And when you spoke about the the um, the process of the 28-day process of that cleansing process for the woman, for the lady, for the female, well, that is in conjunction with the cycle of the moon. It's like we can't get away from the fact that that great magnet in the sky, the moon with its 28-day cycle, it influences all humans. And whether we choose to accept it or not, that process is a 28-day lunar cycle process. So there's cyclical processes that belong with the moon, there's cyclical processes of 28 seasons that belong with the planet, and there's other cycles that our lives conform to, whether we like it or not, whether we're conscious of it or not. But we didn't choose. Here's a great example. None of us chose when puberty would happen.
Mm.
None of us went, oh, it's a good day for puberty. It's a good day for pressing the puberty button. It came upon us, and
Yes,
our systems responded because that's built into our design according to the laws of creation. So we don't have choice about so many things. So to say that we have freedom of choice, it's not really accurate. We have freedom of choice within the laws.
yes,
We don't have freedom of choice. I can't say, oh, you know what? I don't want to die in this life. I'm just going to just carry on. There's a bigger power than me that's saying, well, that's not going to happen.
exactly. So in what you're describing, there is the invitation and the awareness to recognize that part of the creational logic is that there is the moon level or moon dimension, there is the planetary dimension, and there is the solar sun dimension. And we will come back to, as we unfold the creational logic exploration, we will come back to this Trinitarian system, the sun, planet, and moon, and go deep into that. What you are highlighting now is that as we go through the polarity shift from positive and negative, every time we shift between those, between the female and the male, the man and the woman, the knight and the lady, and as you reflected, the lady has the day in her, and we talked earlier about the day as being the positive, and the night has the night in it. We talked about it as being negative, and we're seeing again that the polarity reverses. And so why? The question is why? It's one of the greatest mysteries. Why is there a reversal dynamic as we transition from the exoteric to the mesoteric to the esoteric? Well, one way to contemplate this is that the universe, as we said, doesn't work by addition. It works by multiplications. Actually, it works by exponential. The universe couldn't propagate itself if it worked by addition. So every time we go through an octave change, there is a reversal, there is a polarity shift. And what the polarity shift and the reversal enables, it enables us to shed and leave behind what belonged in the previous octave that cannot be taken into the next octave, the elevated octave. And also the polarity shift creates an enclosure container such that octaves do not leak into each other. There is a functional necessity in the hydraulics of the universal process for different octaves to be in containment. That's a whole other aspect, if you like, of the feminine and the masculine. The containment is the feminine principle. The flow that creates a transition from one octave to another is the masculine function. And we need both in the creational process. And the reversal dynamic is the enabling logic to facilitate octave shift without breaking and creating leaking from one octave to the next. So it is with that that I'd like to bring us now to another aspect of it, which is taking the masculine and the feminine into the two archetypal shapes in the universe, represented by rods and cups, cups and rods and cups. And it's quite deliberate that I'm showing in the cup that it is already two in one rather than one, which is, as we look at number one, it is a rod, but number two has already two natures in it, which is what we were hinting a minute ago about the feminine structure. It has the capacity to 3/4 of the time be in the negative polarity and 1 week in the 28 days to reverse polarity. So just starting here, and I'm going to bring a few more examples, but anything you'd say to how we see and observe and appreciate these two shapes, two archetypal shapes. The rod is the straight line, represents the directional, the intentional, the penetrating, the structural. It is a symbol of the masculine giving principle. The cup is the curved line, the vessel, the container, the receptive, the holding, the enclosing. And I challenge anybody to show me that there is a third shape in the universe. All shapes are made out of these two shapes.
I'd say these two shapes sit very close to the heart of creation logic. And then humans put things with them. But again, looking at ancient history, we'll see, like in India, we'll see in different parts of the planet, that these shapes were not taken as some kind of, yes, they were taken as procreation, but there was nothing put with them of the kind of, I don't know, sexual extensionism goes on today. They simply are what they are. A rod is a fundamental shape in creation, and the cup is the other fundamental shape into creation. And again, I look at language for clues. You take the word production, and it actually has a message in it. It says rod into cup. That's inside that word, looking at how its components or produce is a rod and a cup with a letter E, which I think of as being to do with certain kind of process. So rods and cups are a fundamental expression of the masculine energy. So that energy is manifesting, and it tends to manifest in more of a straight line, more of a rod. The feminine energy is manifesting more in the way of a cup. We'll even find it inside our own individual human design, whether you're a man or a woman, because you've got a rod going up your spine. We actually say, develop some backbone. You've got a rod going up the spine. And then the idea in Christianity of the importance of the grail. Well, the grail is a cup. And here's the cup. Here's the neck of the cup. Here's the shoulders of the cup. We have a cup. We're a walking, talking, moving grail. So we have the cup on our shoulders and we have the rod going up our back, again demonstrating that we have both in each of us, in each form, we actually are carrying both energies. And I mean, if we go into creation math and we see that the rod is representing masculine, well, you cannot say a masculine rod and a masculine rod makes a feminine cup. It doesn't work. What it's telling us is one and one do not actually make two in terms of the shapes that we use. The Roman form they did because it was two rods equals two rods. That's fair enough. That's a tally system. But you can't say two rods equals a curve because the curve isn't there in the original equation. Why is that so important? Because our 9-number system was not originally designed for accountancy and trade. It's designed to show the working principles of creation. Number one is a masculine creation. Number two is more of a feminine creation. And you bring them together, and a third thing happens. So it kind of goes 1, 3, 2, like father, mother. You introduce those two energies, and immediately a third thing is born. As you said, it's exponential.
Yes.
It's not addition.
We will have to, at this point, persuade the listener and the watcher that you have not seen the next slides I'm about to bring, even though you seem to have read all of them. So yeah, so let me bring this, right? Um, and one example, powerful example, we talked earlier about knights and ladies, and you now talked about the cup, is to speak about the rod, the sword, and the chalice, the thrusting and the carrying. So these are the sword is the representation of the thrusting power, and this is why I'm suggesting that it also represents restraint, discipline, self-control, precise action, because if you do not apply these qualities with the sword, you will be in trouble. So the sword is an effective representation of the mastery of the masculine force. It can protect or it can destroy, and it is meant to be contained and kept in check in a disciplined fashion, or else it becomes destructive and dangerous. Well, the cup, the chalice you just described, is the carriage, is the vessel of life, the birthing, as you pointed, the birthing of the connective part of human life, the unfinished part, the part that can evolve and develop. And there is this significant biblical phrase that reads, "My cup runneth over."
Yes.
And my cup runneth over is an expression of the state of abundance, is an expression of the experience and the feeling and the sentiment of gratitude and appreciation and generosity and the sense of being richly gifted and blessed by the so much of life. Once the cup, once the chalice is truly attuned to creational logic and the pouring of the logos into life. So, yeah, that is a description of these two archetypal properties, creational energies, the masculine and the feminine, the cups and the rods. Anything you'd build to this?
They're so clearly designed to work together that it's not a power struggle between the two, which is going to be in charge. They're both, it's a great expression, they're literally in charge. They both carry their own unique energy charge. And those two charges are necessary not only for procreation of another generation of humans, but they literally are working on behalf of creation. So the feminine and the masculine are designed to be working together, kind of like our left and right hand. I think of it this way, that we don't take one hand, we don't the two hands are not fighting each other. They're both designed to work together toward that invisible third, which I'm sure we'll be moving toward. But that invisible third, which is the purpose for both of them. I work a lot with couples, and I come to this term. This is more in the individual relationship, but the mutually agreed purpose between them, which is the map. It's the map of where they're going and their compass that they've decided upon. And then both energies are coming together toward their agreed purpose. And so you have both the sword and the chalice. Both you have the yes and the no, the backbone and the openness, both moving in the same direction. The ability to say no to something, the negation, and the ability to say yes to something, both at the same time.
Well, which brings me to what you already spoke to, as though you read my slides ahead of me bringing them on screen. The spine and the head as the seat of these two powers, the yes and the no, where we also understand that the spinal cord transmits signal between the brain and the body, enabling movement, enabling sensation, enabling autonomic regulation, implementing all the things we turn away from, turn our back to as a way of saying no, and all the things we turn towards where we direct, as you said on an earlier episode, our open eyes to. So the brain and the spine together form the central nervous system, and they govern all bodily functions. And the brain acts as the command center, processing information. Spinal cords act as the super highway and the relay system. They are one unified system. And it is curious that there is communication both directions. The afferent pathway carries, right, the afferent, that's beginning with A, pathways carry sensory signals up from the body to the brain, and the efferent, as in starting with E pathways, carry the motor commands down from the brain in the head to the muscles and the organs. So they together truly form the extraordinary capacity of the human to respond to situations. And yeah, in many traditions, the spine was viewed and is viewed as the pillar or the channel through which the life force come through. It's the channel of life force, the channel of consciousness that awakens the brain in the head. The Kundalini flows, if you like, and the brain is viewed as the seat of awareness, while the spine is the conduit of embodiment. So these two principles, the rod and the cup, they are all over the place. Anything else you'd build to this?
That rod and cup are outside us, inside us. Um, the fact that it moves in both directions is so significantly important to highlight that really, that the spinal system is carrying signals up into the head brain, which I like to call it the spinal brain. They're both brain matter. In fact, if you look at the human structure, it's amazing because every 28 days we're losing skin in terms of the moon. We're shedding skin according to the moon cycle. All the rest of our planetary organism, all the cells are changed over a 7-year cycle, the planetary cycle. But the spinal system and the brains, they are a brain. So rather than thinking of, oh, the brain is in the head and the spine is something different, it's one unified system. It's one unified brain system. And the brain cells last a lifetime. And when it doesn't show us in this diagram, but our eyes are directly connected into our brain. They're part of our brain. And so when you're looking at someone's eyes, yes, they're the windows of the soul. They're also directly wired into the brain. You're looking into the person's brain. So signals are coming in through the eyes into the brain. And when we're happy, as an example, we'll rain something down through our spinal system. Why would someone dance for joy if there's a separation between the two? Because it must be that joy is happening and that is causing the spinal system to go, yay, let's dance. So it's clear that there's a signal passing through into the body, and also the body and the spinal column that's wired into the body is sending signals up into the brain. So it's a two-way process. So the rod and the cup, they work together. Um, into the process of human development, human evolution. By creation logic, they belong together, working together in the many different dynamics in which they appear.
And when we started this approach to masculine and feminine, you said, well, it begins to manifest in organic life. You don't necessarily quite see it in mineral structure. Although if we looked at the atomic structure of the mineral life, we would see the resemblance of the idea of the masculine and the feminine principle there. But certainly we begin to see the cups and the rods with trees. So when we think about the human structure, the spine and the head through the lens of the tree of life, we would say the spine is obviously the trunk, and the brain in the head is the flowering canopy that is open to the sky and to the sunlight. And as we said, the sun is a representation of the life-giving force on the planet. So same here, in the higher part of ourselves, we are opening to the life-giving force, which is why we truly ought to look at the brain and the spine not simply as anatomical structures, but as a living bridge between form and energy, form and energetic awareness, if you like, the physical poetry of presence. And that brings us to one more expression of rods and cups, cups and rods, columns and domes, where we see that in what humans create, in the case of cathedral, and you mentioned cathedrals earlier, the cathedral stands because the columns lift the domes, and it is the dome that offer enclosures. So the rods are elevating, the cups are containing the secret and the sacred space within. And right there in the most important structures that human beings wanted to erect to be, as you said earlier, the sanctuary for communion with the gods. Well, what did we do? We used those two principles. The support of both is what enables us to create a sacred ecology. Anything that you'd offer to that, or actually, let me do this. Let me bring this slide so you can play jazz with all three together, please.
Well, my mind goes to obelisks and with pyramidions on top, where you have like outside the capital. In fact, many major cities in the world, they took the idea from Egypt of having this major rod and then they're placing the pyramidion capstone up on the top of it to then be making some kind of transmission. They put it outside the Capitol in the United States. And why would they do that? Well, the Capitol building itself is more of a dome, but then there's meant to be a transmission of the energy through that obelisk, or in the Christian church, you'll see spires doing the same thing. What is the body of the church is where the congregation gathers and is in a way more feminine. And then you've got the altar and the spire and the priest or vicars underneath that spire, and is meant to be both bringing the energy of the congregation and aspiring it toward heaven and receiving through the spire and then sending that energy through and servicing the congregation. So, when people are going for a service, I think of it like taking a car for a service. They're coming to receive a higher energy, but the mark of that receiving is a spire. It's
Yeah.
really fascinating. Again, we've got the kind of the obelisk or the rod, and then the dome, the basilica, which is more the receptive. And this turns up in our architecture, not because some architect went, "Oh, that would be a smart thing to do," but because we work by creation logic. And so it's obvious that that will make for an effective architecture is to be working with the dimension of rods and cups.
Well, what you're describing is that all sacred geometry and sacred architecture is they represent energetic technology, a technology to bring energy and to transmit energy, because we're living in a universe, in a creation where energy is is the currency of life, and sacred architecture is meant to bring particular kind of energies. So as we summarize this exploration, what we're saying is the rod without the cup becomes aggressive, directionless, or destructive. The cup without the rod becomes passive or stagnant. In their interplay, form and energy, form and flow come alive. This is the geometry of creation. They do not compete, they complete. One initiates, one integrates, one gives, one becomes. And what I want to do is I want to do just one more segment building on this. David, anything before on this before I move us to the last segment here?
It's beautifully done. I would say, and they both develop.
And
One
they
gives,
both develop.
yeah, one gives, one becomes, and they both develop. They help
Yes.
each other in that third process, which is to evolve and develop.
And this now brings us to giving and receiving the masculine and the feminine principles in religions. You talked about this symbol on the right, yin and yang. And let me do a swift run. We could do a whole separate episode, but I want to integrate it still here. Well, when we look at the significance of Judaism through the lens of masculine and feminine, masculine thrusting principle and feminine holding principle, well, when we tell the story of Moses inflicting, as he did in Egypt, on a foreman who behaved in an unjust way and running into the desert, that's Moses in a masculine polarity of himself. But now he's in the desert for many years, and the desert sculpted his character and polished him up the bar of his formation, and such that he can become and find the feminine principle so that he can become receptive to the angel God. the, the, the English pronunciation of which is Yahweh. We're not supposed to say that word in Hebrew, but we do.
Yeah.
So we are experiencing there in Moses already the masculine and the feminine, because for him to be in a receptive mode to the commanding, initiating force that comes and then later issues the law, issues the Torah, he needs to embody both. He needs to position himself in that place, so he needed to be in the masculine polarity in the first place, but then to receive and then issue that command to the people, people becoming the feminine principle because they are receptive, although, as we see in the biblical story, they are not very receptive in the beginning. They are not a very effective feminine principle, and that's when you need to break the masculine principle. He breaks the first issuing of the commandments, and needs to do take two on this episode. So we're seeing throughout the unfolding story that there is a feminine principle that is represented in the people, in the nation, in gathering the receptive capacity, and later it is expressed with the Shekhinah in Hebrew, that really represents what abides, what lives with, what dwells within, and nurtures the presence of God, and is, well, more the subtle presence experience of the divine and the high in the way it expresses itself. So that's one sweep run through Judaism. When we look at Christianity, at the masculine thrusting principle and the feminine holding principle, once again, we will see God the Father represents the masculine polarity, the arising and the work of Christ as the embodiment of that principle on earth, accompanying a human being called Jesus. That is also a masculine thrusting principle. And the crucifixion is in some way the ultimate masculine polarity, because right there he's pouring his life, he's pouring his soul into its custodial form beyond the physical body, such that that formation, that energetic formation, can be accessed beyond the physical person, and each and every person's sins can search to find communion with the Christ principle, which is beyond the man. It's the energetic sun pouring God the Father permission. When we look at the feminine holding principle, the Holy Spirit, which is the feminine representation of that same property, same arising, Mary, the archetype that was there before Jesus and is there after Jesus, right? And the church becoming the embodiment of the feminine principle to receive and uphold the thrusting, giving, nourishing gift of the presence of the Christ. And if we go back to earlier time and look at the Buddhist expression, well, in the case of Buddhism, we have the masculine and the feminine holding principle as well, in that the Buddha is offering the Dharma as his enlightened action. That is, again, the masculine pouring of life principle. And we have the wisdom of compassion and the Bodhisattva vow as the feminine principle, and the Sangha, the community that upholds that. So in so many ways, what we're seeing is that the giving and the receiving, the masculine and the feminine, they develop each other, as you said. They support each other. And I bring it together in this, and I didn't go into Tao, although the Tao is there through the yin and yang, and didn't go to many other smaller religions, but the point we wanted to make here is these intertwining energies that are present in all religions. They're certainly present in the Islamic religion. They are present in ancient, endemic, and aboriginal rituals and religions. Anywhere we will look, we will see the masculine and the feminine. So I invite you to offer some comments as we bring this to conclusion.
Yeah. That when it's working correctly, there's a third force that comes to join. It's where the symbol of the Trinity or the symbol of the fleur de lis. So the masculine and the feminine come into a unison, and a third power is able to be present. And so it takes a robustness in both. They're different natures of robustness, but they're both strong, they're both resilient, and they're both working together, whether inside one person in terms of that brain structure as you showed it, and also in cooperation with others, including the masculine, feminine of the human race. So I think to give each example, like with Moses, just the fact that everybody in the local area, according to the stories, said, "Don't go up the mountain." People go up there and they don't come down. Whatever you do, don't go up the mountain. And he goes, "Oh, that's where I need to go then. I'm going up that mountain," which he did. and and the first commandment he received was take off your shoes. So the idea that whatever it was in that bush, which was not burning, but there was something electromagnetically present, which is why it looked like it was burning. It was in the ground. It was sacred earth. And so it's saying to him, first thing, take off your shoes. Why? Well, so that the energy can come up from the ground and get into you better, so we can converse better. Almost like putting a radio set into the right onto the tuning it in. So, and he then did what he did what it's instructed. He didn't have to. He could have said, "I'm going to keep my shoes on," and that would have been the aggressive, arrogant uh, male that's like, "No, I'm in charge here," and that would have led to a very different outcome. But he took off his shoes, and then he received, and then he was able to go into transmission. So this idea of receive and transmit. It's no longer in the English language, but in so many languages, like in French, it's not based on the gender of man and woman. Everything is given a gender. Tables, chairs, like you're catching a ball, you're receiving, you're feminine, you're throwing it, you're masculine. Now you're catching it, you're going back to feminine. It's even built in at the most fundamental level because that binary principle is so potent. And so in each of the world religions, there's something happened where the two parts have been able to come together, and then that third power, that so-called holy, that holy energy. And what is holy energy? Why is one thing a book and another is a holy book? Well, it's meant to be that there's a higher energy that we call sacred or holy, and it's shown as in the picture there of Buddha with the great golden glow around his head and the great massive aura that he's in. Very often in pictures of Christ, there's that aura that's there, and it's a junction of masculine and feminine that allows a third thing to be present. Now, I'd say in our world today, it's been skewed towards the masculine. I think of the Christianity as example. Their core symbology in the Eucharist is the cup. I think of it as primarily a feminine powered. It's got a center of gravity in the feminine than the masculine. But when we look at, say, the Bishop of Rome, what we discover is it's all men in charge, and something gets skewed, and that's to do, I'd say, with that lack of restraint in the masculine when it gets untethered and um, it gets to no longer make the space for where the charge comes from. I'd close with this, the idea that the feminine offers charge, offers power to the masculine, and the masculine can then take that, work with it, and offer a return power back to the feminine. and they both benefit. And so for one to become dominant upon the other, um, if we take the masculine force to be more like an acid, more red in nature, more Martian in nature, well, if you overextend the that masculine power, you'll get burnt by the acidity. But if you take the feminine power, which is more blue in frequency, the idea of being more Venusian, these are all markers to try and give an indication as to the nature of the energy. But you let that one run too far and become over controlling, you get burnt there too. It's only in the middle of that pH strip where the red and the blue come together and they work in the white. They work in a third principle. Something higher comes to join and both benefit. It's not a power struggle with one being dominant upon the other. It's both working together to induct that invisible third, which both benefit from.
Yes.
So that's what I'd point to as we come toward the landing.
Yeah. A great place to land with the awareness that the giving and the receiving, the masculine and the feminine, as principles work throughout all iterations and all religions and all that we humans do in the current world. When we do look at those ancient religions, we see that humanity was at the time, the epoch was at a masculine phase. And now as the epoch shifts, which we attended to in other explorations, we have entered a much more feminine inclined epoch. Some call it the Aquarian age. We are mapping the transition of the epoch through the indigo and violet, where part of the realization indeed that the new impulse, the third thing, the communion of evolution reveals itself not through a single man, but through the shared conversation between people. And where we started today was in the invitation that by studying and attuning to creational logic, we truly learn who we humans are. It's the know thyself invitation. And that when we do so, we can truly become the instrument of the creational process. And the more we describe, the more we dwell, the more we contemplate what does it mean to become a vessel and a tool for the creational process, the more it becomes clear that this is the aspirational intent of all spiritual work and of all religions. Just what is offered in creational logic is you don't have to decide that you belong to one religion or one denomination. You can actually discover the universal creational logic, and you can take the best of all religions and be liberated by all and from all to discover, yeah, the religion of life, which is expressed beautifully through the appreciation of the masculine and the feminine principles. So, David?
I'll give one further example and this would be a practice. This way we can develop practices not based upon so much personality, but upon creation logic. You see a man opening a door for a woman. These days, that causes all kinds of different responses, reactions. Why should he? Why shouldn't he? Will she let him? All of these things. But it can be that the man opening the door for the woman is doing it in his mind and in his heart and his spirit in support of the feminine energy. So it's not personal. I'm opening the door in support of the feminine power, which this person, being feminine, represents. And so that then lifts it away from the personal dynamic and more into the creation, the outplay, the practical outplay of creation logic.
Yes.
One can be looking, as you just have, at world religions and be saying, where's the masculine influence in this and where's the feminine influence in this? Because both will need to have been there in the beginning. What may have happened over thousands of years, but looking to its origin, the idea of getting to the original idea of something. And in each of these world religions, we see both masculine and feminine, and a mutual interrespect for the feminine power and the masculine power, because in a sense, they're two expressions of the creator. It's like there are two sides of, one could say they're two sides of God. There's a harder side and a softer side, but God, to use that term, has both. God will be positive, negative, and neutral, rather than being necessarily a masculine figure. I think of it that when we look at creation logic, we'll see positive and negative working together toward a third power, and we see masculine and feminine working together toward a third purpose, and that's natural to the house rules and the laws of planet Earth. So it would behoove us well to take note of how things are designed to be in seeking to be in harmony with them.
Yeah, beautifully said. So we started episode 30, the previous one, with a question: what is the logic of studying creational logic? How about if we land it here with another contemplative question you invited us into, which is what would become possible when tomorrow all men saw all women as representation of the feminine principle, the feminine energy, and all women saw all men to be a representation of the masculine energy. What would happen? What would become true? What would become possible if we viewed each other through these lens, rather than not by being holy, but by seeing the unavoidable, profound reality that we are not just the persons we are, but by design we are a representation of a certain permission, a certain possibility, a certain property. And I leave us today with this contemplation. What would become possible? Could the color of the sky change from blue to indigo, one wonders? What else would become possible in human affairs, in the pain and strife and struggle all over the planet, when we viewed each other to be the true creational representations that we are? Thank you, David.
Beautiful. Thank you, Aviv.
To be continued.
Until episode 32. All right.
Yes.
Bye for now.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.